It's going to be a masterclass on handling contract assets, liabilities, and costs of completed contracts in Sage 300. So in this live stream, we're going to be going over how to handle and set up your asset accounts, your liability accounts in the general ledger, your revenue, your cost accounts, and how it all works with the percentage of completion accounting, and some common practices that make it easy with Sage 300 and just in general. And then we'll also touch on overhead costs as well. So first we're going to go over some just general, what a very simple financial statement would look like, along with the WIP or work in process or construction and process schedule. And then we're going to show you how to set up some of these accounts and some things in Sage to mirror what I'm showing on the financial side. And then we're going to talk about some methods of using and applying labor burden and overhead costs to jobs and to the general ledger, and how to kind of reconcile all that. And then we're going to go through some commonly used reports on in Sage 300 to tie all of this out. So first, I just want to go over a simple financial statement along with the work in process schedule. This would be for the percentage of completion method of accounting. There's also the completed contract method of accounting that is different than how this percentage of completion works. So in your balance sheet, you're going to have some accounts that are pretty custom to construction. So retainage is one of them. So you'll have a retainage receivable and a retainage payable account. So if you're new to construction accounting, this would be, if a vendor, a subcontractor invoices your company and they invoice you $50,000, you might withhold $5,000 of payment from them until they get the job done and you're satisfied with the job. Then you pay the retainage out at the end when the subcontractor is all done with their work. It's kind of like a guarantee of that their work will be completed satisfactorily. So your retainages are something custom to construction. Also, these costs in excess of billings and billings in excess of costs are two accounts that are pretty custom for percentage of completion accounting for construction. On your income statement, you're going to have a change in billings in excess of costs and a change in costs in excess of billings. So it's going to be, it flows with these two accounts. So when we make the journal entries for month end to adjust these two accounts, the offset are these two related accounts, okay? Which we'll go through that, how that all works. Your billings account is one that I recommend you set up to flow all of your accounts receivable billings through, and that ties to your WIP schedule. So we'll go through that. Service revenue is just a completely separate revenue stream, so it doesn't have anything to do with WIP, but a lot of contractors have service or time and material type revenue that they don't track on the WIP schedule. So that doesn't really tie to anything in this whole WIP calculation. So common cost of revenue accounts are material, labor, subcontractors, other. It's pretty common with construction. And then you've got your, again, this is very simple income statement, but short one, but you've got some operating expenses down here, okay? Just as an example. So on the WIP schedule, what this does is it calculates how much revenue I am going to recognize for the month. And how it does it is it defers it with an over under billing calculation on each job. So I'm estimated to make this much and bill the customer this much at the end of the day, but it's going to cost me this much to build this warehouse. I'm going to make that much on it. Job to date, so this could be 2021 and 2022 costs. So job to date my costs, and job to date my billings. But I also want to have a column here that ties out my 2022 costs to my 2022 income statement. So if I go over here, if I set up Sage and I set up my accounts correctly, it's going to match these right here, the 12,016,208. So you want to hit your cost to revenue accounts with your job cost. Then you have your 2022 billings number here, 13,460,078, that you'll want all your billings related to jobs on your WIP schedule to come into one account. So it's going to help you tie out, which is something you should do every month, tie out your billings and your costs to date. Okay, so I'm not going to go into great detail on how percentage of completion is calculated, but I will post this on the live stream so you can see the calculations. But basically what it does is it says, I'm going to take 5.9 million and divide it out into what the costs are at the end of the day to build this building. So I'm 25% along. So it's using cost to determine how far along you are. And then I'm going to take that times the contract price, and that should be what my revenue to date should be. If I build something different than that, then I am over or under billed. Okay, so your revenue is dictated by how far along you are here times your contract price. So for each job, you calculate how far over or under billed you are, and you record an entry to a journal entry to record this. So you would, in this case, it's a liability because I'm overbilled. So I'm going to credit billings in excess of costs, and I'm going to debit change in billings in excess of costs. Okay, those two accounts for that monthly entry. And then just the opposite here, you're going to do a debit to cost in excess of billings and a credit to cost in excess of billings accounts when you record the change in this account month to month. Okay, so year to date is what I'm showing on this income statement over here. So for the 11 months for November. So year to date, I have tied out the change in my over or under billings account. Okay, so 37,000 and 100,000 should show up over here. Okay, so basically what you have when you do this is a complete reconciliation of your costs and your revenue, your billings, excuse me, and your over under to the balance sheet. And excuse me, I had a typo on here. This 37,000 here should be the number here, the change. It was 50,000. Okay, so I just corrected that. So your year-to-date change here is what should flow through on this income statement. Okay, like shown. All right, so in Sage, what you want to do is in General Ledger, you want to make sure that when you come in here to set up your accounts, your costs in excess of billings is an asset account. Okay, so you want to make sure you have that account set up. Your billings in excess of costs right here should be current liability. Okay, Then your change in billings in excess of costs is an income account. So you create like a 4,000 if you're using fours as the revenue, called change in billings in excess of costs. And then you're going to use 5,000 if that's your cost of revenue for your change in costs in excess of billings. Okay, so for that account, so this is your asset. So then you would set one up to be the cost side for the offset account. Okay. Inside here as well, you're going to want to make sure that the easiest way, like I said, there's people that do it a little differently, but I like to put all of my billings to one revenue account that are related to that WIP schedule, and then put my other billings related to other types of like time and material or just miscellaneous selling of parts or something into different accounts. So I like to use that one account as a control to tie to that WIP schedule. Okay. Any of your costs on here, let me go back to the income statement. These here, the only thing that really should be hitting these are job costs that come through to your jobs that will be on the schedule. So the easiest way is just to call them a control account in the general ledger setup so that you don't have accidental journal entries going there or something that should not be hitting there without at least a warning that this is a control account. Okay. All right. So at the end of every month, when you're done recording your accounts payable, you want to run this period end report for AP accounts. So this is the only report that will tie out to the general ledger correctly. And it does list your accounts payable and your retainage payable separately. Okay, so when you enter in an invoice from a contractor, for example, you will have a section that you can put in your retainage payable. I'm going to ignore that. Just put something in here. So down here, you have retainage and then the gross. So like it was good example, like if you're charging, if a subcontractor billed you $50,000 and you want to withhold $5,000 from them, when you pay them, they'll get paid $45,000. So your AP report would show the $5,000 in retainage and the $45,000 in the AP column on this report. Okay, so you want to make sure that you run this specific report for AP at month end and tie these two accounts out. Okay. So in accounts receivable, you're going to get all your billings in. You're gonna post them all. And you're gonna come here. I usually run this one, encompasses all my customers. Now there might be some non-job related billings in here that aren't on your WIP schedule. So then you'd run the detail by job report for tying that out to your WIP schedule. Okay, but just it's about the same report, but it groups it by job. but you tie out your AR to this column and your retainage receivable to that column. Okay, it shows a negative. Don't be thrown by that. It's just, it's still a debit, but that is the report you'll use for tying that out. Okay, then in job cost, you can run the WIP as a specific date. So I'm just pulling up an example one here. And it's going to give you, like I had on this Excel file, your estimate, your revised contract, cost at completion is one I don't have on here, but that's listed here. Your job to date cost, your percent complete, your job to date billed, and then your over under billings. So billings in excess is over billing. And your costs in excess. Okay. So if you use the other report in here that has a total on it, you can get your totals here and make your journal entries right from the Excel file or right from the report designer here. Okay, so Sage doesn't have automatic revenue recognition to make that journal entry for you, but Sage Intacct and some other systems do automate that a little bit more. But, so you do need to use a report out of 300 to get the numbers you want with the cutoff date for this WIP. Okay, so if you close a job, it'll fall off and you won't be able to tie out your costs and your billings to you know, your WIP schedules, or if you keep it outside in Excel, or your financials. So just be cognizant of that. Are some things we can do and show you and recommend to if you want to close a job down so that no more costs hit, and put a control in place there that where you can still keep it on here. We just would condition this report a little differently for you. Okay, so in payroll, so labor is a subject that's a pretty big one in construction. So in construction, you have the cost of your employee. So if you pay them 20 bucks an hour and you have your burden, your benefits you pay them, 401k match, payroll taxes, you know, all that good stuff. Work comp is something you can calc using the payroll module. And Sage can treat and hit your jobs with the actual costs of your laborers. So it prorates. If someone works on 3 different jobs in a week, for example, it'll prorate their fringes based on the hours they work on those jobs. In general, that's how Sage handles it. So there are companies that want to charge just like a flat hourly rate to a job for a person that is coding time to that job. So if a carpenter is working on a job, he works 10 hours that week, and the company just wants to charge 40 bucks an hour as a cost to that job, that is a little difficult to do in Sage 300. If you want to bill out at 40 bucks an hour, that's a little bit easier in 300. So if you want your cost report to show a flat rate that's different than their pay rate, then that's a little bit harder to do in 300. There's other systems that can handle that, and there is ways to do it in 300. And that would be a scenario where we would want you to reach out to us so we can walk you through that. But the general basic way that Sage handles it is you record time, you put hours into a job. When you enter time here in payroll, it costs their actual payroll costs out to the job and their burden out to the job and prorate it And that's the best way Sage knows how to handle it. In the billing module, if you have billing module in Sage 300, you can set up rate tables so that if someone codes 10 hours to a job, I want the billable rate to go out at 40 when it generates the invoice to the customer. Your cost report, however, will not show it that way. Your cost report is going to show the actual payroll cost. So say you paid the person $20 an hour plus fringe. That's what it'll show. So there are a couple different things you can do that some people do implement, and with the labor and labor burden. So they might only send their pay to the job cost module, but not their fringes. So they might come in here and say, I don't want my 401k match to hit jobs. So you would uncheck this here, and it wouldn't distribute to the job cost module and hit any jobs that are coded, any time that is coded, and any burden that would prorate to that job if they have 401k match going on. Okay. Some other companies will put an automatic fringe on. So say I have employees that cost me $20 an hour. Let's say it's carpenters or something, I don't know. And you want to just add another $20 an hour for fringes in general. Like maybe you want your cost report to show it that way. You could come in here and set up an automatic fringe and just call this overhead or burden, labor burden, and hit this automatic employee fringe and give it a $20 an hour flat amount that will go along with the hours of the employee. Okay, so there's different ways you can use the payroll module to automate some things. But like I said, if you want to do something where you just want, no matter who, like your carpenters might be paid different based on their tenure of service, but you want all carpenters to charge your job at $65 an hour, no matter what their rate of pay is, that's a little harder to do in here. So that's where we'd want you to reach out to us. But like I said, billable rates are pretty much, you can bill and set those up. But if you want your cost reports to reflect, what I just said about like that $65 an hour, that's a little harder to do in here. Okay. So these distribute boxes kind of play with what you want to hit job cost as far as your labor and burden for jobs. So you don't really want to uncheck GL on most of these. So if it's units or something, yeah, that might not be checked, but generally you want to have GL on always. Okay. So as far as any other overhead goes, so when I talk about labor and labor burden, I'm talking about the cost of an employee to the company, their pay rate, and the burden, labor burden would be your 401k match, your health benefits, anything related to payroll that way. When I talk about overhead, we're talking about of a company, we're talking about this stuff down here. So some companies will estimate, I might have $1 million in overhead in the year. And I know that I might have, 100,000 man hours. So I want to take that man hours that will get coded jobs, and I want to charge an overhead burden of $10 an hour to jobs. And I want to recoup it down here in the overhead. So you might have like a, people call it different things, but something like this, where let's say they did exactly 100,000 hours. And then up here, it would charge your jobs, and you would have overhead allocation. So the debit would be to the job for $10 an hour, debiting maybe that account number, and this one would be more like a overhead account. Okay, so these two would wash out at the end of the day, but you're able to charge this cost to the jobs and maybe pass it on to the owner. So there's different ways that people calculate the overhead recovery they want to do. You don't have to do it based on man hours. You could do it just you could just pick a flat amount that you want to charge every week. You could do it via journal entry. You don't have to use payroll. You could do it based on revenue of a job. So there's different methods that people employ, but payroll does, as a fringe, you could set up something that it would automatically calc an overhead fringe based on, $10 an hour down here. Okay. And that would add to employee records as you process. So just some different ideas, different ways to employ payroll, labor burden, overhead inside Sage 300. This is an overview. So if you want to deploy this or get it in place and you have further questions, we want you to reach out. I'll bring up a slide here that has our info on it. So you can post a response to this live stream, and you can go out to help at Banger, or you can send an email to help@bangerinc.com. You can look at some other of our YouTube videos as well. But if you have a specific question on this one, submit a ticket to us or respond to this live stream, and we will get back to you. Thank you for your time today.